question is no longer, who gave you that? They don't care. I want one. They had been waiting 1,000 years to sing Psalm 118. We can't even, I don't think we can comprehend that. They had been waited 1,000 years from the time David penned it until they could actually sing it and Jesus arrived. So I believe they understood the fulfillment, but they didn't know what he was going to actually do. And by the end of the week, they're scratching their heads when he's on the cross. We missed it? How could we miss it? It was like right there. Well, if you read Psalm 118, it says they were going to reject the stone. And they did. But Jesus is giving them the opportunity. He's in their face saying, the game's not over yet. It's only Monday. You got a few days to be like the tax collectors and harlots that you actually are. And admit it. And come to the light. You're liars. You're thieves. You destroy people's lives. Just come to me and let me forgive you of all that and just set you free and know my love and my peace. Come. No, that's not going to happen. Verse 43, there was a judgment on a people group. Some Bibles will say nations. And a lot of the scholars say he was basically saying, I'm taking it from Israel and giving it to the Gentiles. No, that's not what he's saying at all. He's saying there is a nation. There is a group of people that I'm going to give it to who are going to render fruits. It's not based on Jew and Gentile. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what I said I would create all along. Back in Exodus 19, and this is where it gets confusing to people. In Exodus 19, because he's looking at a whole bunch of Jews and he says, I'll make you a holy nation. They're thinking, oh, well, the Jewish nation, that's us. He said, no, I'm saying that you can be part of a holy nation that I'm going to create that's going to involve people from all over. Different sizes, different ages, different sexes, harlots, tax collectors. It's going to be quite a crew. And it's going to be a holy nation. Now that blows your mind. You say, a holy nation? What are you talking about? Oh, I get it. So he was going to sanctify them. You need to we still, and this is one of my little pet peeves, that we lump everything into this sanctification thing instead of recognizing what God calls holy. We call holy something else. Something that holy, I have made you before the foundations of the world, and you are holy, and I made you holy. But you've been impacted by people around you, by your parents, by circumstances, all kinds of stuff has clung on to you. But you are holy. Listen to me, you are holy. You are a holy people that I created. And if you let me get rid of that stuff, then you can be the unique entity that I created you to be. Otherwise, you're carrying all these weights around, you can't run the race. Simple as that. If you've ever run, you know you don't want to put a bag of bricks on your shoulders. Not if you want to win anything. So he's saying, I created a holy people. The tax collectors and harlots walked away from those things that were making them unholy. But they're holy. It's a holy nation. They're unique. I love Mario Murillo's book, Fresh Fire. He calls them the Lazarus generation. These people that come out of the tomb because Christ has called them out, they stink, they smell, they're all wrapped up in all kinds of problems. Go bear fruit. Go loose them. This is what Mario Murillo. And he said, these guys that come out of the tomb, the Lazarus generation, watch out. They're not going to be satisfied with doing little Bible studies. They're going to change the world. They are going out to change the world, and they'll be sitting at a table with Jesus in the next chapter, and the world will be coming because they're going to want to kill him. As bad as they want to kill him, they're going to want to kill him too. A holy nation. In verse 44, he shifts from a people group to individuals, and he warns them about the stone and the falls. That if you fall on the stone, you'll be broken. If the stone falls on you, you'll be ground to powder. So he's letting them know point blank. He's quoted the stone which the builders rejected. You need to understand the nature of the stone. If you think that you are going to destroy him, you're wrong. You'll get broken in the process. I kind of like to think of the potter and the clay that God fashions. You know, Jeremiah talks about it, Isaiah, Paul. They all talk about the potter and the clay, that he fashions this beautiful thing, this beautiful vessel. if that vessel decides that it is going to attack the potter, wage war with the potter, he's going to get busted into pieces. But then what's going to happen, there's going to become a time, the time is coming, when the rock will fall on that broken vessel. And it's going to be ground to powder. Now the illusion is sort of like back earlier in Matthew, at Jesus' baptism and stuff, where it talks about the winnowing fan and the chaff is going to be blown away in the wind. That when the kingdom, the actual kingdom of Daniel 2, and then we're going to read that. Somebody want to go to Daniel 2, verses 34 and 35. That when the kingdom comes, which it has in Christ, he's saying to them, you are about to fall on the rock, and I'm telling you something. It's going to bust you up. The beautiful piece of pottery that God made that could be so useful, a vessel of honor in the house of God, Paul talks about, instead of being that beautiful vessel, you become a vessel of dishonor, busted up. That he can put you back together again. So if you get busted up, he'll put you back together. This is not a problem for the potter. This is what he does. He's encouraging them. Okay, so if you fall on me, this is what's going to happen. But if I fall on you, it's not going to be a pretty sight. You should know that from reading Daniel 2, verses 34 and 35.
While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth.
I was thinking about it this last week, being blown away. That Paul talks about the winds of doctrine. That the children of God, when they're children, they get blown away by the winds of doctrine, and a time is coming where the wind is going to blow away all doctrines. Actually, he associates it with growing up in love. When you're committed to love, I'm not saying you shouldn't have sound doctrine. I'm just saying it runs a very distant second to loving people. The stone which the builders rejected. Let's read that from Psalm 118, verses 22, 23, and 24. Somebody want to go to Psalm 118? It's a phenomenal psalm.
The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
To help bring a little understanding to that verse, when builders, masons, whatever you wanted to call them, when they were building something, they had to choose which stones to use and which ones not to. Not like today, you go to Home Depot, buy a bunch of bricks, whatever. Not like that. They had to actually go out and find stones. Some that could be cut the way they wanted them to, some that were perfect just the way they were. Masons and builders were the ones that were responsible for picking out the stones. Now, a lot of times, they would find a stone that didn't suit their needs at the time. But they didn't necessarily throw it away. They put it aside and kept it in mind. There's a stone over there. It might fit sometime. I don't want to mess with, but it might fit. But the builders were the ones that were responsible for choosing what stones would go into the building and what stones would not. And obviously, a cornerstone is the most important stone that you're going to lay because it's the foundation of the entire building. The religious leaders were the builders. The stone which the builders rejected. They were supposed to be builders. They decided what the chief cornerstone, the foundation, what the authority should be. So the question that I want to end with today and talk about is, what is the stone? I always say, oh yeah, it's Jesus. Well, I get that. I understand it's Jesus. I said earlier, who wrote Psalm 118? It's a Psalm of David. When you go back and you read, it says he prevailed over Goliath with a sling and a stone. But David was originally rejected. Okay? What I mean by that, when you go back and look at the anointing of David, he wasn't in the room. By design. Samuel comes, wants to see the boys, and his father Jesse deliberately brings the 7 in. And they pass before him one at a time. And then Samuel asks, are these all the boys? You know the story? It's like, well, yeah, there's one more. Question has to be asked, why wasn't David brought in with the rest of them? It was a choice that was made by his father to remain outside, taking care of the sheep. It's a good job. But he wasn't brought in for Samuel to even look at him. In Psalm 51 is the psalm that David prays when he had his fall with killing Uriah, Bathsheba, that whole thing. And it's his cry before God for forgiveness. And he says a lot of phenomenal things. But in Psalm 51, verse 5,
Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me.
it literally means in Hebrew, I was conceived in sin. We don't know because the Bible doesn't tell us. And that's what we got to go by. What happened with David's mother, with Jesse, and what the sin was that was associated with his birth. We do know this. 7 boys are called in the room and David's not. We know that David shows up in the face of Goliath. Do you remember how he's greeted? What are you doing here? If you follow the impact of that rejection on David's life, I've said for years and years David couldn't keep it in his pants, excuse me, but that's for years. He couldn't find enough things. Rejection has a lot of work. It works out in a lot of different ways. And to me, it's no coincidence that there's a sense of being conceived in sin, and his entire life he fights with his sexuality until he's an old man. We're not making excuses for him. We're not saying that, oh, poor. We're saying is that there was something that was taking place. David, with his stone, he knew the stone that was rejected. In fact, when he gets there, he's got a stone to offer, doesn't he? He goes to the river, he pulls out a stone. He's got something to offer. And they're questioning him.